So today we're going to be talking about outliers. This is our last lesson before your test, which is on next week, Thursday. So we're going to be doing a project that will kind of count as your quiz grade. The next couple days we are reviewing, and then test is next week on Thursday. So last new stuff for this unit. So we talked about quartiles a little bit on Monday, but just a refresher, quartiles divide your data set into 4 parts with the same number of data values in each. So when we have our box plot, we talked about with our 5-number summary on Monday, the box is made up of, we have Q1, our median, and Q3. The median, again, is also called Q2 sometimes. But again, these quartiles are just breaking up your data into 4 equal parts. So this right here, from the minimum to Q1 is 25% of your data. From Q1 to the median is 25% of your data. From the median to Q3 is 25%. And from Q3 to the maximum is 25%. So if we want to know like where the middle 50% of our data is, it would just be from whatever your Q1 is to your Q3. It's the middle 50%. Okay, so we're going to use these quartiles in order to find outliers, numbers or values that are considered unusual for the data set and don't fit in with everything else. So to find the outliers, we first need to calculate or figure out what Q1 and Q3 are, which our calculator will tell us. So determine Q1 and Q3. Again, we can do this in our calculator. And then with these values, we calculate what's called the interquartile range, or the IQR. Interquartile range, or IQR. And that's just the range between your quartiles. So the IQR is equal to Q3 minus Q1. So your upper quartile minus your lower quartile. So now with the quartiles Q1 and Q3 and with our interquartile range, we can now determine what's called the fences, which kind of give us boundaries for where our reasonable data would lie. So to determine our fences, so we have our upper fence would be our upper boundary. So to calculate that upper boundary, you take your upper quartile, so Q3. And it's the top boundary, so we're going to add 1.5. It's just always 1.5 times the IQR. And then that equation gives you a boundary. It's not giving you the value of an outlier. It's telling you if any of your data values are past that boundary, past that fence, they would be considered outliers. I'm going to do the same idea for our lower fence, but it's the lower quartile, so Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. So the 1.5 times the IQR is the same for both of them, but for the upper fence it's Q3 plus, and for the lower fence it's Q1 minus. Okay, and again, these are boundaries for normal or acceptable values. So to determine the outlier, step 4 would be then to look at our data values, and if any of your values are above your upper fence or below your lower fence, those data values would be outliers. Okay, and again, these are boundaries for normal or acceptable values. So to determine the outlier, step 4 would be then to look at our data values, and if any of your values are above your upper fence or below your lower fence, those data values would be outliers. they're above, oops, I could spell, above the upper fence or below the lower fence, they would be outliers. Okay, so to do an example, we first, with this data set, we need to figure out what our Q1 and Q3 are. So in your calculators, we need to enter in this data. So you hit your stat button and then edit and enter in these values into L1. You want to practice this so that you know what buttons to push. I can't answer any calculator questions on tests, so practice now while you have the chance. So just a reminder, once you have all your data entered into L1, then you hit the stat button again. Go over to the calc menu and select that first option, 1 var stats. Hit enter until all that information pops up on your screen. And then the Q1 and Q3 are part of the 5-number summary, which if you scroll down, should be at the bottom of all that information your calculator gives you. So has anybody gotten there yet? Do we know what Q1 and Q3 are?
Q1 is 59.5.
Thank you. And Q3? Awesome. So 59.5 for Q1 and 91.5 for Q3. So to calculate the outliers, we need to calculate now the IQR, which is Q3 minus Q1. So 91.5 minus 59.5. So we should have our IQR equals 32. So then we need to calculate the fences. So our upper fence, or UF for upper fence, is our Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR. So it would be 91.5 plus 1.5 times 32. Be careful when you're plugging this in your calculator. Either do the 1.5 times 32 first and then do the addition, or just type it in exactly as it is with parentheses. You should get an upper fence to be 139.5. And then for the lower fence, you take your Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. So 59.5 minus 1.5 times 32. Again, just be careful with when you're plugging it in. You should get a lower fence of 11.5. So again, these are not your answers. This is not telling you 139.5 is an outlier or 11.5 is an outlier. These are giving you your boundaries. So any data values that are within these bounds are considered normal or acceptable for the data set. If you have any of your data values outside of these bounds or outside of these fences, those would be the values that are considered outliers. So we need to ask ourselves, are any values larger than our upper fence, so larger than 139.5, or smaller than our lower fence, 11.5? So looking at our data values, do we have anything that's greater than 139.5 or smaller than 11.5? Where's 145 is in that first row towards the end. Yes, 145 is greater than 139.5. So 145 is an outlier. Okay, if all the values are in between those fences, then cool, there's no outliers for that data set. So the fences just give you the boundaries so you know where to look. You guys have any questions on outliers? What, yes, a question?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, okay.